Welcome back to AI Unraveled, your weekly strategic briefing on the business impact of artificial intelligence. It is the second week of January 2026. If you thought 2025 was the year of model releases, 2026 is starting as the year of consequences. A bombshell study from Stanford and Yale just proved that AI models can regurgitate nearly entire copyrighted books, potentially leaving the industry exposed to billions in damages. Meanwhile, the coding crown is up for grabs, as insiders hint that DeepSeek V4 is prepared to beat ChatGPT and Claude at their own game. Also today, Meta looks to nuclear energy to power its Prometheus supercluster. Amazon launches a controversial employee tracking dashboard, and the UK government threatens a total ban on X over AI-generated deepfakes. But before we dive into the weekly rundown, are you drowning in dense legal text? JamgaMind is the new audio intelligence platform that turns 100-page healthcare or energy mandates into 5-minute executive briefings. Whether you are navigating Bill C-27, Canada, or the CMS 0057F interoperability rule, USA, our AI agents decode the liability so you don't have to. Start your specialized audio briefing today at jamgamind.com. This podcast is created and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. Now, let's unravel the week.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This week was defined not just by raw computational scale, but really by the scale of ambition.
And the constraints that ambition is now hitting.
Exactly. We saw this intense competition for coding supremacy, tech giants racing to literally secure nuclear power, and the entire legal foundation of generative AI just dodging these existential bullets.
I mean, the whole battleground has shifted. It's not just a simple contest of who has the biggest model anymore or who bought the most chips.
Right.
The theme this week is really maturity under pressure. AI is hitting these friction points, legal risk, resource demands, competitive efficiency, and it's forcing the labs to innovate everywhere except that simple parameter count.
Okay, so let's get into it. Our mission today is to dive deep into the source material and really understand 4 critical shifts that I think are going to define the rest of 2026.
Yeah.
We've got the rise of the specialized code agent, this legal time bomb that's just ticking for the major models, the infrastructure race moving toward nuclear, and that essential technical shift from just big brains to, well, smart scaffolds.
And that's the key. We want to give you the shortcut here. We are moving from a world that was just obsessed with maximizing the size of the brain to a world obsessed with optimizing the quality of the tools and the memory around that brain.
That's a great way to put it. It's the difference between having a super genius and having a reliable, tireless employee.
Precisely.
All right, let's start where the rubber meets the road. The code wars. The biggest rumor swirling around the enterprise developer space right now is this DeepSeek V4 threat. Insiders are saying DeepSeek is planning a mid-February release and that internal tests are showing it significantly outperforms both Claude and ChatGPT.
And specifically on these extremely long multi-file code prompts, which is where the real complexity is.
So that's a huge signal. I mean, to really claim dominance in automated software engineering, DeepSeek V4 has to beat the current record holder, right? Which is Claude Opus 4.5.
That's the one. Claude currently holds the SWE-bench verified record at a, frankly, staggering 80.9%.
And for anyone listening who maybe isn't deep in the weeds on this, what is that benchmark? What does it mean in practice?
So SWE-bench is really the industry gold standard for real-world coding. That 80.9% means that Claude can accurately resolve nearly 4 out of 5 real GitHub issues.
So not just toy problems.
Not at all. We're talking about complex, multi-component bugs or feature requests that would normally take an intermediate developer, several hours to fix. Claude can do it entirely on its own.
Wow. So if DeepSeek V4 can clear that, say, 81% hurdle, it becomes the go-to coding assistant.
Indispensable, yeah.
But that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How is a Chinese model managing to pull ahead of the U.S. giants when they're operating under these really tight export restrictions on the best U.S. chips? What's their technical edge?
This is where you see innovation just born from necessity. DeepSeek's secret sauce? Their potential, it seems, to come from a new training method they're calling Manifold-Constrained Hyper-Connections.
Okay, that is a mouthful. Let's look past the jargon.
Yeah.
You said they're attacking the stability problem.
That's the core of it. When you train these massive, massive models, the larger they get, the harder it is to maintain stable connections between all the neurons, especially if you're on a distributed hardware setup.
And even more so if you're using a patchwork of less powerful chips.
Exactly. So think of it less like simple Legos and more like trying to manage network traffic in a giant distributed computing cluster.
So if I can't buy the best fiber optic cable, I need to design a much smarter routing protocol to make sure my data packets don't get lost or corrupted, even on my slower network.
You nailed it. Manifold-Constrained Hyper-Connections is that smarter routing protocol. It's an innovation that lets them scale their models larger and more stably, getting the absolute most out of the hardware they do have.
So it's an algorithmic gain that translates directly into raw performance.
And that puts immense pressure on the incumbents, whose main strategy has just been brute force hardware acquisition.
And you can see they're feeling that pressure, specifically Anthropic. They seem clearly worried about DeepSeek gaining ground here.
Oh, they are absolutely reacting defensively. First, they added safeguards to block third-party tools like OpenCode that were spoofing the Claude code headers.
Right, I saw that. So these tools were letting people get around the expensive per-token API rates.
Yep. They were basically accessing the high-performance Claude models through cheaper flat-rate consumer plans. Anthropic realized it was basically subsidizing its own competition.
And then came that really surgical strike against Elon Musk's XAI.
That was a direct shot across the bow. Anthropic cut off access for XAI staff who were using Claude through the Cursor IDE, and they specifically cited their terms of service about competitors training rival AI systems.
So the takeaway here for developers listening is pretty clear. Workflow stability is very uncertain if you're relying on these kinds of gray market access points.
And for executives, this whole thing proves that the next wave of innovation is coming from algorithmic efficiency. How smart you are with limited resources, not just who can buy the most NVIDIA chips, the game is changing.
And that focus on efficiency leads us right into the infrastructure race. I mean, if we're hitting limits on silicon efficiency, we're definitely hitting the wall on power, which brings us to this really stunning development. Meta is going nuclear. They've secured agreements with Vistra, TerraPower, and Oklo.
All of them working on advanced nuclear tech. And this raises that huge strategic question, why is big tech suddenly trying to become a utility company?
Well, these deals are designed to feed the beast, right? AI's computational needs are just hitting the physical limits of the U.S. power grid.
Right. And Meta needs that reliable, high-capacity energy for its massive Prometheus supercluster, the one being built in New Albany, Ohio.
We've talked about data center growth before, but the scale of this, it requires moving beyond traditional renewables. Nuclear is pretty much the only source that can guarantee that kind of long-term, high-density, carbon-free power for exascale computing.
It's an unavoidable cost now, and it signals a real commitment. Meta isn't just buying power off the grid, they're actively partnering with the innovators. They're treating energy security like it's as important as data security.
So if power is the physical supply chain challenge, let's talk about the intellectual property supply chain, which is facing just massive scrutiny right now.
You're talking about the OpenAI move.
Yeah, OpenAI's controversial play for training data.
This is a huge risk factor. So OpenAI and Handshake AI are asking third-party contractors to upload real work they've done in past and current jobs.
Actual files.
Actual Word docs, PDFs, Excel sheets, code repos. They want the real finished product to automate white-collar work, not just synthetic data.
And they claim they're mitigating the risk because they have contractors use a ChatGPT superstar scrubbing tool to delete proprietary and personal data first.
And that is where the whole model falls apart. I mean, IP lawyer Evan Brown put out a severe public warning about this. He said this approach puts the AI lab at great risk.
Because it all comes down to trust.
A lot of trust in its contractors to decide what is and isn't confidential. That trust is a massive decentralized legal liability that no piece of software can reliably fix.
That's just wild. The security of a company's crown jewels relies on a contractor's personal ethics versus, their need to earn an extra $100 for a good data upload.
It's a fundamentally broken security model built on outsourced risk.
So the implication for your company is immediate. This is the new IP supply chain thread.
Yeah.
You need to be asking if your internal documents are being scrubbed and probably poorly and uploaded by some contractor to train the very model that might automate their job.
It's a serious question to be asking. And if we're talking about the IP you're ingesting through contractors, we have to talk about the even bigger threat of the IP that models might be regurgitating.
Yes. The legal time bomb, the Stanford and Yale copyright study.
This study is, to put it mildly, dire for the industry. They found that major AI models can reproduce nearly complete copies of copyrighted books.
And the example they used was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
And the data points are just damning. Claude 3.7 Sonnet reproduced an incredible 95.8% of the book with jailbreaking.
Okay, but with jailbreaking, you can argue it's the user's fault.
But here's the crucial part. Other models did it without jailbreaking. Gemini 2.5 Pro reproduced almost 77%, and Grok 3 hit over 70%. The capability is just baked into the model. It's not reliant on user trickery.
So what's the critical legal implication here? We keep hearing that these models are protected under fair use because they don't store the data, they just learn statistical relationships.
Exactly. This finding just torpedoes that core legal defense. I mean, when a model can output almost an entire verbatim copyrighted book, the argument that it merely learned a statistical relationship becomes, well, it becomes almost impossible to defend in court.
So this exposes the whole industry to potentially billions in damages.
This is maybe the biggest existential legal threat the industry has faced, period.
And while the courts are chewing on that huge problem, we have immediate safety regulation being tested right now, specifically with xAI's Grok image creator.
Right, the deepfake crisis. The publication of sexualized deepfake images of real people led to a huge international outcry. You had Democratic senators in the U.S. calling for App Store removal.
And xAI's reaction was interesting. They limited the image creation function, but only to paid subscribers.
Which isn't really a safety fix, it's an accountability fix. It means the company has identifying info on the users, making them liable.
But the real regulatory hammer might be about to drop from the UK.
It might. UK Technology Secretary Liz Kendall stated publicly that she would back the regulator, Ofcom, if it uses its power under the Online Safety Act to just block UK access to X entirely.
Block a major platform like X from an entire country. I mean, that's unprecedented.
It's a huge test case for regulatory power. The act gives them the power to get a court order to stop payment processors, ad networks, hosting companies from helping X operate in the UK.
So these are the untested business disruption measures we've heard about.
And the UK is making it very clear they are willing to pull that trigger to enforce safety regulations on generative AI.
Let's shift gears now to where the most cutting-edge technical innovation is happening.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, it's not in building bigger models. We're talking about the Confucius Code Agent, or CCA.
Yeah, from Meta and Harvard. And this is a landmark piece of research because it completely changes the focus. The core question they asked was, how far can a mid-sized model go if you shift all the innovation from the model's brain to the agent, scaffold, and tool stack around it?
And this is where it gets really strategic for anyone listening who's building applications. The key finding is just striking. The scaffolding outweighs the model size.
It does. The CCA, which is built on something called the Confucius SDK, showed that Claude 4.5 Sonnet, that's the smaller, faster, cheaper model with strong scaffold, it achieved a 52.7 resolve at one score on a really tough coding benchmark.
And that score surpasses the larger, theoretically superior Claude 4.5 Opus, which only hit 52.0 with a weaker, more standard scaffold.
It's definitive proof. The size of the brain matters less than how skillfully the architecture around it manages its memory, its tool use, and its long-term planning.
The paradigm has just fundamentally shifted. I mean, if you can get better performance by optimizing the scaffold around a mid-sized model instead of throwing billions at the next giant one,
then the entire development roadmap for the industry needs to change.
But wait, if the scaffold is the real lever here, doesn't this just encourage fragmentation? Now everyone needs a custom scaffold for every little task instead of relying on one powerful backbone model.
It absolutely encourages specialization, but it's a specialization that drives efficiency. And that's why we need to understand what this scaffold, this Confucius SDK, is actually providing. It's not just simple tool calling.
Okay, so let's break that down. This is where the deep dive really matters. What are the key elements that gave the smaller model, Sonnet, the Edge, over the bigger one, Opus?
Okay, first is something they call hierarchical working memory. This is crucial for managing long-term tasks across a huge code base. Current agents fail because their context window just, rolls off and they forget things. This lets the agent remember the overall project structure.
That makes a ton of sense. For a complex coding task, you have to remember the architectural decision you made 3 hours ago. What's the second piece?
Persistent notes. These are like cross-session reusable memory. The research shows that when the agent reused these structured notes, basically writing down what it learned from its own failures and successes, it solved problems faster.
How much faster?
It reduced the number of turns from 64 to 61 and cut token usage from over 100,000 down to 93,000. And it boosted success rates. The agent learns.
That is a massive efficiency gain just from having like an effective notebook. And the third element.
Learn tool routing. So this isn't just a static list of tools, it's the smart sequencing and application of them. Better tool handling made the crucial success score jump from 44.0 to 51.6.
So it's the intelligence in the decision-making layer, not just the tools themselves.
Precisely. And the final piece of genius is the meta agent, an AI that automatically tunes the CCA itself through a build, test, and improve loop.
Wow. So the agent is teaching itself how to be a better agent.
Exactly. So for developers and executives listening, the strategic takeaway is crystal clear. Stop obsessing over who's releasing the next biggest LLM. Focus your innovation on the agent architecture, the scaffold. That is where you're going to find the most immediate and cost-effective productivity gains.
Okay, before we wrap up, we need to touch on how these technologies are changing management itself. We're moving from automating code to automating, well, the monitoring of human behavior.
Right.
This week, we saw Amazon launch a dashboard that brings high-tech surveillance right into the white-collar office.
It's a fascinating, if a bit chilling, use of data analytics. Amazon managers can now monitor employee productivity based on their physical presence.
Wow.
It's based on how often staff come into the office and how long they stay, and it's all using badge tap data collected and aggregated over 8 weeks.
So it's not just a raw report of who badged in. What's the AI layer here?
The system uses pattern analysis to group workers into categories, things like low time and zero badgers. It also flags people who frequently enter buildings they aren't assigned to.
So it's turning what used to be informal attendance into a hard, auditable metric.
Exactly, and creating these categories of compliance risk.
The context here is just essential, though. This dashboard comes after Amazon's 2024 5-day return-to-office mandate.
The one that an internal survey found 73% of employees were considering quitting over. The tension was already sky high.
And this dashboard just quantifies that tension. It really shows the future of management in the AI era is this granular measurement of employee presence and movement. Attendance isn't an informal policy anymore. It's a verifiable metric.
And it creates a huge challenge for managers, right? How do you balance this clear quantitative data with the human discretion they claim you're still supposed to have? It quantifies the unquantifiable.
What a week. I mean, just profound strategic and technical shifts. So to quickly recap the 4 major fronts, the legal foundation of generative AI is seriously shaking over this copyright issue. The infrastructure requirements are moving out of the cloud and into the realm of like nuclear physics with Meta's energy deals.
The competitive edge in coding is now shifting to algorithmic efficiency, driven by Chinese innovation like DeepSeek's new training methods.
And most critically, the key software innovation is now in the tools surrounding the model, the scaffold, not the model itself.
You've got DeepSeek winning the efficiency race in models, while Meta is winning the energy race in infrastructure. But that Stanford and Yale study, it just raises this fundamental, provocative question that hangs over everything.
Which is?
Does any of that matter? The efficiency, the infrastructure, the scaffolds, does any of it matter if the entire industry faces regulatory closure or just bankruptcy over the collapse of the fair use legal defense?
What happens when a model that saves you money on chips gets you sued for billions over IP theft? You, the listener, you really need to consider the implications of moving intelligence from the size of the brain to the quality of the tools around it. The scaffold is the new moat.
But that moat is currently surrounded by a sea of intellectual property lawsuits. Keep digging and connecting the dots.
We'll see you next week for the next deep dive.
That wraps up our briefing for the first full week of 2026. The signal for this week is sovereignty. Meta securing its own nuclear power, Anthropic locking down its API borders, or the UK asserting its safety laws over international platforms like X. The borderless era of AI is coming to an abrupt end. We are moving into an era where physical energy, legal jurisdiction, and proprietary data moats define the winners. Before we go, a reminder for the leaders listening. Are you drowning in dense legal text? JamgaMind is the new audio intelligence platform that turns 100-page healthcare or energy mandates into 5-minute executive briefings. Whether you are navigating Bill C-27, Canada, or the CMS 0057F interoperability rule, USA, Our AI agents decode the liability so you don't have to. Start your specialized audio briefing today at jamgamind.com. This podcast is created and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. Please subscribe and share. Until next week, keep unraveling the future.